One big reason new reptile keepers may struggle with purchasing a reptile has everything to do with where the animal came from. Maybe you once thought snakes were dangerous or not for you, and now you're realizing you might actually like them. Or maybe you have several reptiles, but you are curious about introducing something to your collection that is wild caught and so significantly less expensive than a captive bred animal. And if that's where you are right now, this video is important. One of the biggest mistakes new reptile keepers might make isn't about enclosure size or heating or humidity. It's even before that. It's about where the animal came from. Today we're talking about wild caught versus captive bred reptiles, what the difference actually is, why it matters so much, and why wild caught animals are often far more difficult than people expect. I want to introduce my Sri Lankan python, Saga. She was purchased captive bred from Joe Patino of Sin City Reptiles, great breeder and an admin to the Facebook group, The Reptile Rebellion. I'm also an admin along with Morgan and AJ. We focus on kindness and mental health in the reptile hobby, as well as just about everything else you might want to talk or ask about. I want to say right up front that this isn't a judgment or shaming video. And absolutely not a you're a bad person if you bought a wild caught animal video. People don't make that choice because they don't care. They make it because they don't know. So let's clear that up. First, let's define the terms and actually what they mean. A captive bred reptile is an animal that was born and raised in human care. Its parents were already established, feeding, and acclimated. And in many cases, captive bred themselves, and the baby was raised around people, enclosures, and routine husbandry. A wild-caught animal is exactly what it sounds like. It was taken from the wild, exported, shipped, sold, and eventually ended up in someone's home. And neither of those words automatically mean good or bad, but they do mean very different challenges. Now let's talk about why wild-caught reptiles are usually much harder, especially for beginners. The first big issue is stress. A wild-caught animal doesn't just wake up one day and calmly move into a nice enclosure. He's captured, often suddenly, handled by multiple people, held in unfamiliar conditions, transported long distances, shipped and stored, and shipped again. And then finally placed into a brand new environment that smells wrong, feels wrong, sounds wrong, and operates on rules it has never experienced before. Imagine being grabbed out of your home, put into a dark box, shipped across the world, and dropped into a place where nothing makes sense and where the giant nearby wants to look at you, feed you, and sometimes pick you up. That animal isn't calm, it's in survival mode. And chronic stress alone can weaken the immune system, suppress appetite, and cause long-term health problems. The second major issue is parasites and illness. Wild-caught reptiles almost always carry internal parasites. Many also arrive with external parasites like mites or ticks. Some are dehydrated and malnourished. Some look perfectly fine until they're suddenly not. This is one of the hardest things for both new and even seasoned keepers. A wild-caught reptile can look healthy and still be very sick. And treating parasites isn't simple. It often requires fecal testing, medications, quarantine, repeat treatments, and careful monitoring. Things most first-time keepers aren't prepared for. This isn't because they're lazy, it's because nobody told them what they're getting into. I've been through it myself. Early on, I brought home a pair of wild-caught emerald green skinks and a wild-caught mountain horn dragon. They looked okay at first, but within a week, they were gone. They were already stressed, dehydrated, and likely carrying parasites, and everything declined so fast that I didn't have time to realize they needed vet care. That experience showed me how little margin for error wild-caught animals really have. And then there's feeding. Captive bred reptiles are typically raised on predictable, accessible food items. They learn early that food comes through people, that prey looks a certain way, and that eating doesn't require risk. Wild-caught reptiles don't have that background. Some will only recognize live prey or only eat specific species they hunted in the wild, and some will refuse food for weeks or months due to stress. And for a new keeper, that can be terrifying. You start wondering if you're doing something wrong, then you panic and change things constantly, and the animal gets even more stressed by constant change. I've been there, even with captive bred. Fortunately, I have great friends I can talk to. Now you do too. Another big factor is behavior. Wild-caught reptiles aren't aggressive, but they tend to be way more defensive. They've survived by assuming that anything bigger than themselves is a threat. So biting, musking, hissing, fleeing, freezing, those aren't personality flaws, they're survival strategies. And while some wild-caught animals do eventually calm down, the process can take years, especially when the wild-caught animal is an adult. That doesn't sound like fun to me, although I never got to that part with mine. It's very different from a captive bred animal that has grown up around people and learned that interaction isn't a threat. Now here's where I want to be clear. People buy wild-caught reptiles for understandable reasons. They can be much cheaper up front, and sometimes the species isn't available captive bred, and sometimes the seller doesn't explain the difference. Sometimes the animal looks calm in the store or expo, and sometimes people genuinely believe that wild-caught means more natural or healthier. Most people don't buy wild-caught animals because they're irresponsible. They buy them because nobody explained the reality. Now let's talk about something important and often misunderstood. Wild-caught animals are not always bad for the hobby. They can be critical for establishing captive bred populations. They can provide genetic diversity. They can play a role in conservation breeding when done ethically and legally. But, and this is a big but, that work is usually done by experienced keepers, breeders, or institutions who are prepared for the risks, costs, and responsibility involved. This is not where most beginners should start. I'm not a beginner, but I now realize my limitations and experience levels. I'm not ready for that. I may never be, and that's okay. So what should new keepers do? Start with captive bred animals whenever possible. Ask questions, real questions, before you buy. How long has it been feeding? What does it eat? How often? Was it parasite treated, disease treated? And finally, how long has the seller had it? I want to add here that animals that are long-term captive may already be stable and can do just fine. The seller may have already done all the hard work for you. Just ask the questions. I know it can be hard, but try to avoid impulse buys and research. I want to end with this. If you care enough to learn about reptiles, if you care enough to watch videos like this, then you care enough to start with the animal that has a chance to thrive with you. Wild-caught reptiles aren't bad, they're just hard, and beginners deserve honesty about that. If you've ever owned a wild-caught reptile, I genuinely love to hear your experience, good or bad, in the comments. These conversations help people learn without repeating painful mistakes. Thanks for being here, and thanks for caring enough to ask the hard questions. Please like, comment, and subscribe. My channel has only just started consistently, and I really need your help. Thank you so much for joining us.
Learn from the serpent's ways, to trust, to love, to simply stay. For in the silence we understand the beauty, the wonder, the mysteries at hand.